Hello, everyone. My name is Shane McElroy, and welcome to all of you joining us on our Dairy Focus live webinar today, where our topic is the control and prevention of thermoduric issues on farm. To cover the topic, we're grateful to our two milk quality specialists on the webinar today from both Teagasc and the Glanbia technical team. Thermoduric bacteria are a specific type of heat-resistant bacteria that can be present in milk and impact on the quality of finished dairy products. Some of you may have had thermoduric issues on your farm in the past, and while there can be many factors causing thermoduric problems, on the webinar today we will walk you through how they can be managed and also presented on farm. For today's interactive session, you'll also have an opportunity to ask questions from the technical experts on how to manage and prevent thermoduric issues. We'll have best practice advice from Teagasc milk quality specialist Dave Gleeson, as well as from our own senior milk quality manager, Fionnuala Malone. The format of the webinar today is to have a number of slides from Fionnuala and Dave with videos in between that have been recorded on farm to make it real and practical so you can see how it works. This will be followed by a question and answer session towards the end of the webinar. And we'd encourage everyone on the call today to submit your questions, and we'll endeavour to go through as many of these as possible during the Q&A session at the end. The webinar today will be recorded and will be available afterwards via Glanbia Connect and on our YouTube channel. So we'll run to about 11:20 today with the Q&A session at the end, where we hope you'll put your questions to our speakers. And that can be done by email to hello@glanbiaconnect.com or text message to 087 173 8217. So later on in the webinar, Dave Gleeson will take us through the importance of milk and machine maintenance and wash routines. But first of all, for our first slides, Fionnuala will bring us through the importance of thermoduric bacteria when it comes to finished dairy product quality. And just as a reminder, we'd like you to become part of the conversation by sending in your questions by text message or WhatsApp to 087 173 8217. Over to you, Fionnuala.
Thanks, Jane, and good morning, everybody. Thanks for taking the time to tune in, and I hope that everybody gets something out of our session this morning. I'm just going to cover a tiny bit before we hand over to Dave. And I suppose one of the questions that we're often asked on farm is, why do processors worry about thermoduric bacteria? And the really simple part of it is that depending on the milk quality coming in, that's what's going to go out with thermodurics. So the less thermoduric bacteria that come into the processing, the better milk quality product, the better quality products we can get out the other side of it. Thermoduric bacteria are unusual insofar as pasteurization doesn't actually get rid of them. Pasteurization, around for a long time, makes raw milk safe. There's always going to be bacteria in raw milk, but thermoduric bacteria are the ones that actually survive the heat step. So pasteurization doesn't get rid of them. They tend to be the slightly more troublesome bacteria, the ones that nobody wants to hear about: Bacillus, Clostridia, Enterococci. So they're the ones that really, everything we can do on farm to prevent them coming in, and that's a lot of what the milk quality advisors and myself do day to day. It's all about trying to keep them out. So if we can keep them out of the plants, then the end product will always be better. So that's what today is all about, is actually trying to advise, how do you avoid them coming into us in the first place? And therefore, how can we always get out better quality products at the end? An example of how thermoduric bacteria will affect products is a really simple one to talk about, is actually shelf life. So shelf life of liquid milk products will be reduced if there was high thermoduric counts in there. Cheese will have an issue as well. And sometimes you can see very high numbers in powder, which doesn't make it ideal. So everything today is all going to be about preventing the problem coming on farm. And also we're going to do some troubleshooting as well, and investigative stuff about how can you actually deal with the problem if it comes up. Most importantly, how can you actually avoid it in the first place? I'm going to hand over now to Dave Gleeson from Teagasc, who we're delighted to have with us today on the webinar. And I hope you enjoy his piece, which is going to actually cover all the background around thermodurics and what the research says and how to keep them out. Handing over to you now, Dave. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us. My presentation today is going to deal, I suppose, with the control of thermoduric bacteria, and also look at, chlorine-free milk and the wash routines and so forth. So first of all, I suppose there are critical control points for thermoduric bacteria. And the first major control point is at farm level, is at the cow and environment. And it's important to understand the source of thermoduric bacteria. It's in the environment, it's in the soil, it's in silage, it's in feces. So the critical is to stop thermoduric bacteria getting into milk in the first place. That's the first part of the control program. And obviously, you know, when cows enter a milking parlor, their teats, there's infinite numbers of staph, streps, thermodurics, bacterial counts. So a pre-milk and teat preparation procedure, even cluster cleaning, but you know, automatic systems, will all reduce the amount of bacteria getting into milk. Very important if you're pipping cows or doing anything is the teats are dry before cluster attachment. That's a key one. And often happens in scenarios where you have very wet weather and you have no teat prep going on. Then you have very wet weather and you have a lot of water on cows' teats. And then you have a thermoduric problem. So it's very important that teats are dry at all times. The roadways we're going to discuss in a minute, but it's very important from a point of view of keeping the hygiene of the cow good. So that could entail, you know, clipping tails at least 3 times a year. Some people do it on a regular basis. Also in the parlor, you know, your gloves and hands. Just wearing gloves doesn't mean that everything is good. You need to disinfect the gloves when you're wearing. Make sure the gloves are clean. So a key part of this is the approach roads and the collecting yards. And the next video that Fionnuala is going to run through is going to demonstrate to you the importance of the roadways. The second part of this is stopping the thermoduric bacteria multiplying in the plant. So once it gets in, you know, you've got to stop it multiplying. And the key way of preventing that is a good wash program. So that you're following a protocol, a cleaning protocol, not your own, one that's been tested on research farms and so forth, and we know works. Critical to have enough of water from a point of view of for your wash system, for your hot water, whatever, because you need to cover all the surfaces of a stainless steel pipe. So that's critical that you have enough, 9 liters units, what we recommend. The chemical usage will depend entirely on the product, what's written on the drum, first of all, but it depends on the quantity of water in the wash trough. There's no point in you asking me how much should I use. I'll ask you how much water are you using, how much hot water per liter, per unit are you using, and then I can tell you how much detergent you should be using. So measuring the trough, a key one. The hot water, look, it's critical, and especially in a chlorine-free environment. You're talking about 75 to 80 degrees kick off, and we'll come back to that again in a minute. The other key one that from a troubleshooting point of view, I'd always ask, is the water hard? If the water is hard, you need acid more regularly than if it's not hard, or if you're using it, obviously it's water softener that would counteract that. But the scaling is to remove mineral deposits from water. So it's very important that the scaling happens at least twice in a chlorine-free environment, and in some cases it would be three times. Peracetic acid, look, is very effective against thermoduric bacteria, and it's used in a final rinse. It's an additional rinse. So there is a distinct difference between peracetic acid and Descale. Peracetic is a disinfectant. Descale is a sterilizer, and it removes mineral deposits. Next, yeah. So this video is going to cover, you know, the importance of roadways, maintaining low thermoduric counts and teats coming into the parlor.
So one of the most key pieces around cow management for prevention of thermodurics is actually the roadways, and actually the way as you bring cows into the parlor. If your roadways get dusty, muddy, and not so good to walk on, your cows are always going to be kicking up lots of dirt and dust onto their teats. That's not ideal, because it actually leads to more need for teat prep and cleaning teats when they come into the parlor. Now, a lot of the time teats will look clean to the visual eye, but there will always be a layer of dust there, and that's where thermodurics come from. They're in the environment, they're in soil, and they're in mud. The other piece is that because your cows are coming in to be milked, a lot of them are starting to let milk down, and the sphincter muscle is opening at the end of the teats, and that's a real key place for bacteria to actually get in.
Okay, so then a third aspect which is very important in the management of thermodurics is your management in the farm, in the parlor, and to do with the bulk tank and so forth. And these are just some of the points that I've highlighted here, just to make you aware of them. One is that cracked rubberware is a key part. Right? Broken old rubberware will allow thermoduric bacteria to survive. That's the hot water and the chemicals won't get at them. So it's very important that you're obviously replacing your liners every 2,000 milkings. And that your rubberware at least every second year that you would upgrade it. The vacuum line is another key one, especially it should be part of an annual service, and it should be, especially if milk liners break and there's milk getting up into the vacuum. It's very important because you're going to debris fall back down into the receiving vessel when you turn off the vacuum. So clean the vacuum line, should find out how to do it. You could do it yourself then more often. Okay, the plate cooler often comes up as a key one, and yes, it can be. And the one way to counteract that is you have a clean filter sock for each wash procedure. If you leave the old sock on, there is more vacuum and more pressure on when you're actually doing a wash program as compared to milking, as you have variable speed pumps going on for the milking. So you have more pressure. You're likely to break this sock, and this debris will all end up inside the plate cooler. So clean filter sock for the wash program. Feed bins for dust should be covered in the parlor. Bulk tank milk outlets. This is a key one here, because very often, especially where tanks are not filled from the bottom, is that this outlet could be milk taken out for the cat and not just sterilized or washed afterwards. And all the milk passes through here before it goes into the collection tanker. So it's very important to keep that outlet clean. Also avoid milk pipes immersed in milk during the milk transfer. It happened in a lot of these smaller plants where you have milk tube inside in the bulk tank and it ends up sitting in milk. It's bad news. So the other important one, without dwelling on it, is obviously the place of the cooling. And cooling is critical from the point of view of not allowing the thermodurics to grow. And a key guide is by the time you're finished milking your last clusters, about 30 minutes after that, you'd like to see the temperature of that milk brought down to what it should be. And a key thing to achieving that is obviously a plate cooler. Simple check. Go and check, is your plate cooler bringing your milk down to about 15 degrees? If it's not working, functioning correctly. But that's a key one. 30 minutes after you finish your milking is a good guide to know have your compressors big enough or your tank big enough for your purpose. This is a further video on bulk tanks.
To check your bulk tank, the best thing to do is directly after the milk has been collected and that the tank is finished washing, go up to the top of it with a torch and have a look around inside to see, can you see any evidence of build-up or scale or any problems like spray balls or agitators. They may have build-up or something could be dislodged. Always don't forget to check your outlet. Your outlet pipe is where bacteria can build up as well, and all the milk will pass through the outlet. So if that's not clean, that's where your problem could be coming from.
So just a couple of key messages from that. Look, poor hygiene scores. Look, simply cow with dirty flanks and tails. The chances of being thermodurics in milk are much increased. There's plenty of research showing that. The other thing then, I suppose, is, the build-up of residue on the internal surface of claw pieces. And I say claw pieces because they're the hardest to clean. Plastic surfaces are always where you'll see the problem first. And that's an ideal feeding ground for the thermoduric bacteria. That's where they'll multiply. So milk residues, where you have a build-up on a claw piece, that's a sure sign you're going to have a thermoduric problem. Okay, chlorine-free cleaning. And this is we've all moved to chlorine-free cleaning now, and I just want to highlight the changes that were required for this. And these are combination of changes, and there's there's tweaking of the original protocols. But everything has changed. You cannot just change the drum from a detergent sterilizer to a chlorine-free and expect everything to work as normal. It will not. There has to be certain changes. For example, you're following a new protocols, and you need to get the protocol to speak to your advisor to find out which is the best protocol for you. Next slide, please. Yeah. So looking at, first of all, sodium hydroxide, and this is typically in the past, sodium hydroxide is caustic, was about 14 or 15% of the good product. Now it needs to be up higher. The strengths are up 21, up to 30% actually. So as compared to powder products, and this is something of interest, is that they're much higher strength, or 50 to 80% caustic in them. So they are useful certainly in manual systems. The usage rate is 0.7 or it could be 0.8%. You've got to read the drum. Now, in the past, that was 0.5. So you can see that the usage rate is an increased usage rate is required. Again, you've got to measure that trough, and I'll come to that in another slide. A guide is you shouldn't be using liquid. You shouldn't be recycling these products anymore. They're not suitable for recycling. Calibration, critical. You need to calibrate any of the automatic dosing equipments before when you move from one product to another, because the concentration of caustic is increased. You've got to calibrate, otherwise the suck-up rates will be way different. This is just moving on to the wash trough measurement. It looks like a complicated slide, but it's actually not. It just goes through the step, and you'll have it available to you. You want to measure the length by the breadth by the height of a wash trough. Now, if your trough is tapered, you measure the height at the width at the where the water level goes to, and then you measure the width at the bottom, and you divide it in two, and that gives you the width of the product. So length by the breadth by the height in cubic meters will give you 1 cubic will give you 1,000 liters. And you know that the guides are, we want 14 liters per unit for rinsing out the milk and detergent. Milk is just as important as rinsing out the detergent. And for the main wash, at least 9 liters per milking unit. Some of the larger plants are using 10, 11, 12 liters per unit. So at least 9 liters. So now you know straight away I've got the right amount of water. I have a good chance of covering the pipes. I have a good chance that I'm going to have a clean plant. Yeah, this is giving some very interesting information on detergents and how to address what you have on your farm.
The most important thing when you get a delivery of your new detergent, a couple of little things to check. First of all, check the pipes. So if you've got an auto washer, check that your pipes are actually clean before you put in your new detergent, particularly if they're different products. With the change away from chlorine, what we found is actually the whole idea of the general routine is actually gone. Every detergent range should actually be double checked when you put it in your own parlor to make sure you're following their instructions. We found that you need extra acid washes, and you're balancing that then with your caustic washes as well. Some people will have found that staying with powder works really well for them, while other people have gone towards 2 different liquid detergents. What we find the most key thing when you get your new drums of detergent is actually to read what the instructions say on it, and then have a look if you've got hard water, might be another factor coming in, and you'll know that from your farm. Acetic acid is great, but it's not a detergent. It's actually the little add-on at the end. Really good at this side of the year if you've got any little bit of a problem. It will help keep clean machines cleaner. So what you do is you add that into your final rinse, but just really note that it's not the acid wash. So sometimes people might just get a little bit mixed up with that. So those are the 3 components that this farmer is using. Really good. He's got a good powder, he's got an acid, and he's got acetic acid then that goes in his final rinse. So match your brands, make sure you're using the same range. We find that works easier, and stick to your manufacturing instructions. The other thing that you might do is when you've got a bit of a challenge like this side of the year, tweak your routine bit. Work with your milk quality advisor and your milking machine technician to come up with the best routine that will suit your machine.
Thank you. So back to the hot water. Look, as I said, 9 liters a unit. A minimum of 7 hot washes per week are required. That's it. Now you might get away with 5 or 4 or 5 if you're using the powder systems, which are only suitable for manual systems. So 7 hot washes. In most of the protocols that we've developed, we've used them for the hot washes in the morning milking to use night rate electricity if you have electrical water heating. So the water temperature in the trough, this is very important. There's no point checking the temperature on the tap. It's the temperature when the trough is filled, ready to go, ready to circulate it. And you're looking at 75 to 80 degrees starting temperature. Your end cycle ideally should be at least 50, a minimum of 45. So your target should be targeting 50 at the finish. And there's a few ways to achieve that. And one is, it's the length of time that the circulation is circulating for. 8 minutes is plenty. Some of these automatic systems are set up to run for 15 minutes for that main wash cycle. So you take that back down, and that will change the end temperatures. The other facility that's in lots of these auto washers is to allow first maybe 15 or 20 liters to go to waste. And that, again, it's only a matter of turning that on in a lot of the auto washers, and they're not turned on. So there are some new water heater systems that will maintain temperature right through the cycle. So this is another video on hot water usage.
Today, when we're checking for where problems could be, is we're actually going to measure the hot water temperature. So I've just got a thermometer, and we carry them as milk quality advisors, but any thermometer will do. And really what we're going to do is we're actually going to measure the temperature of the water as it's coming out. But most importantly, we're going to take a temperature measurement when the trough is actually full and ready to go, because it needs to be 70 degrees to starting off. If your machine isn't being washed at 70 degrees, you're not going to get a really good clean. Always measure the dumping temperature as well. That's the other one to measure. If you go back and when you're watching the water go to waste, measure that. That should be about 55 degrees, and that tells you the water is hot enough going through the plant. It's really important to actually pre-rinse your lines. So actually, if you pre-rinse your lines with hot water, you'll actually get the lines warm before you put in your hot detergent wash, and that means that the first bit of hot water with the detergent won't get wasted just heating up the lines.
Okay, moving on to the use of acid, and as I said earlier, the importance of acid for mineral deposit removal. Acids, the minimum you have to use really is 2 acid washes per week, and that's where you have a scenario where you have 14 hot washes going on a week. So other than that, you need 3 acid washes a week. That's what the trial work told us, that we needed three acid washes, and that's where a lot of guys are falling down in now. So the scale acid wash is exactly the same as it was before. There's nothing new here. This is phosphoric, generally speaking, is phosphoric nitric, and it's the same. It's the same as traditional. There are new one-for-all based products which actually do a descale, clean, and disinfect. So they're standalone products. Peracetic acid, some of you are getting familiar with that now, and that's a disinfectant. It's not a descaler, and is used in an additional final rinse. You don't use it in the rinse after detergent. It's a food safe product. It evaporates, and ideally, I would kick it in about an hour before my next milking. And where the protocols, not all protocols require it. In some of them, it's useful. Okay, just on the cleaning protocols, I'm not going to go through each one of them, but you can follow this web link that I have down here, where you'll find there are 5 milk machine cleaning protocols. One of those is for powder systems. The other 4 give you different options, whether you have 14 times hot washes or 7 hot washes. It gives you the program to follow, and most companies are falling into line with those protocols. So then you have 3 options in the bulk tank cleaning as well, and that can be alternative acid versus caustic, or it could be a one-for-all product or whatever. So they are, and these are available on the website. So generally speaking, acid wash systems, are more suited for automatic systems, and powder systems. Powder washers are more suited to the manual wash systems. Next slide. Yeah, this is. I just wanted to put this across. This is actually all the farms that were nominated for the Milk Quality Awards this year, right? Based on 2020 figures it's for 21 award, right? And the farms are all from 12 different milk processors, and that's the total bacterial counts. You can see the second column. That's the average for the year. And then you have the thermoduric counts, the average for the year. 2 crops don't measure. So about 50% of them are on manual systems and 50% are on automatic systems. Obviously, excellent milk quality all around. These guys are on chlorine-free for some of them for 2 and 3 years. So this is the protocols they're actually using. So you're looking at the hot washes down along the line. You can see that nearly all of them are achieving the 7 hot washes, and the other ones are using the protocols that require 14 hot washes. And look at their temperatures. The temperatures are up in 80, 85 degrees, maybe one exception of 65. And you can see then that there's a range of products being used. So the product range, is protocol is the important one here, right? In my opinion, that you got to have the temperature, you got to have the number of hot washes, the number of acid washes also are in line with what they should be. Generally, if you have 14, 2 acid washes is fine. If you haven't, in 7, ideally you need 3. So look, you can see there's just 3 of those farms using peracetic acid. That's the point. You don't need it in all scenarios, especially if you're using 14 hot washes. The requirement is minimum for them. So you can see that, look, top quality milk can be produced with chlorine-free cleaning if you follow the protocol and look at those temperatures and look at those number of hot washes. And now these guys hadn't, I think in the whole 12 months, and they're obviously recording every month, I think there was 3 figures that were up on the 500, close to the 500 level across the whole lot of the 12 farms. So it just shows good quality milk can be used with chlorine-free. Okay, just to conclude, and I don't need to repeat that again, but I do need to repeat that following a cleaning protocol is a critical part of any, whichever you pick, stick with it, follow the program, get your advice from your milk advisor if you want to decide which one is best suited to you. So I'm going to hand back to Fionnuala now, who's going to probably summarize or give you some further comment on Thermodurics.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks a million, Dave, for that. Yeah, I suppose just maybe come back to a little bit about what happens within a processing system and where we test and things like that. So I suppose one of the basics is, everybody asks how often we test raw milk coming in. So everybody's tested at least once a month. And we also test a lot of the loads as well on a monthly basis. And we do follow up further testing for suppliers if they're investigating issues, and also where we found loads where we seem to have a problem, we do some follow-ups there as well. It's a plated test, and I think that's, that's one of the things that frustrates everybody, including ourselves as advisors. This takes about 3 days to get your results back. It's agar placed, they're poured, and the colonies are counted. You can see on the slide the little pinhead colonies there. That's what everybody is counting when they're actually coming up with the numbers. And I guess that's the other question that we get asked as advisors. My TBC is grand, it's about 3, and how can I have 600 thermodurics? I think we're all guilty of sometimes forgetting that TBCs are actually counted in thousands. So the text on your phone that says 3 or 6 actually means 3,000 or 6,000 or indeed 30,000. Thermodurics, you're getting them back in single numbers. So always think your thermoduric bacteria, that's a portion of the bacteria that are in the milk. So a lot of, as I said at the start, a lot of the bacteria is actually gotten rid of through pasteurization, and the thermoduric ones are the ones that survive. That's actually how we test. We take the sample each time and we actually pasteurize the sample and then streak the milk out on the plate and look to see a couple of days later what has actually grown. So we mimic the pasteurization step that happens in the factories. The really big thing for us is the less that come in, the less bacteria, thermoduric bacteria that come in the raw milk, the better the quality at the end. We can't do a lot to take them out. They won't be killed by the heat steps. And in fact, a lot of them will multiply along the way, and that makes it difficult. Next slide, please. So I suppose just to wrap up, hopefully you've got a little bit out of this. And I guess for me, it's always like looking at it like a jigsaw. There's a lot of different pieces in it. And I suppose start with the cows, the cleaning, the cooling, but also equally important is, hot water equipment and your detergent protocols. The really big thing is where the bacteria are coming in from. They're actually coming from the soil. They're coming in on the teats. So the teats and the milk are the only two things that can bring in bacteria. And it's the outside, it's the bacteria that are coming from the outside of the teats cause our problems. When they enter the machine, then obviously, if there's anything, just a little misstep at all in a protocol or a rushed week when everybody's busy or something like that, or the water heater broke down for a week or two, that's when things start to build up. What we talk about in farm, we often talk about biofilm, and people ask us, what's that? And it's like a little micro environment. If you can imagine it, it's a little environment that bacteria live in, and a biofilm builds up, and it's kind of a waxy, wax or a slimy kind of texture to it. You'd often see us looking at claw pieces, feeling around with fingers or swabbing or gloves and just trying to find that. And the bacteria live underneath it. So that covers them off and saves them from the hot water going over them. And that's why we need really strong detergents and really good, strong hot water, and that gets rid of them. If we go to the next slide, please. What do the results mean? The really big thing to focus on for your farm is actually keeping it down. So really good clean milk with low thermoduric bacteria will actually be under 250 or even 200. So if you've got anything above that, you need to investigate what's happening. And sometimes you'll find the problem and you'll find the actual buildup, and that's really important. That's great. You can shift that by redoing your detergents and hitting it strong. But what's more important is actually to keep investigating and figure out, well, why did that actually happen? Was it a once-off that you ran out of detergent? Or is it that your hot water hasn't been quite hot enough? Or indeed, going back to Dave's point about the wash troughs, is your wash trough just not big enough? Do you need an extra wash trough? So that's the really key point to actually look at. Try to keep your thermoduric bacteria levels on your tests coming back to you way down. They should be way less than 250. We test product at the other side of it. We test every batch of product going out gets a thermoduric score. So a lot of the time people wonder how often we're testing that as well. And that's the answer to that one. Next slide, please. So just to conclude on, there's three things in this for me. And the first is all about minding the environment. So everything about the environment is what determines what's coming in the raw milk. It's making sure that your passageways and your collecting yards are clean. Your roadways are really important. The better your roadways, the less lameness you're going to have, but also the better walking conditions for your cows and less dirt and dust that will be kicked up. Use your right amount of detergents. Make sure you've got the right amount of hot water and that it's hot enough. Changing your rubberware is crucial, and there's been an awful lot of work done and talked about from cell check and the mastitis side of the house when we talk about changing the liners every 2,000 milkings or every 6 months. That's actually really important to double check that you're changing your liners often enough. Because lots of people have a few extra cows over the last number of years, and you might just need to change them earlier. If you don't, what you find, the cracks that Dave talked about, you might find the ones that are visible to the naked eye, but usually there's actually plenty of microscopic cracks beforehand, and that's what causes an issue. The other rubberware in a plant is important to change too. Rubberware should be changed at least every 2 years. If you're leaving it longer than that, you are providing the perfect environment for bacteria to build up. Keep an eye on your water as well. You test your water for your B audits, but even actually checking, if you can't get to the bottom of an issue, check your water. Just see, is there a contamination after happening to your water? So if you're cleaning your plant with water that's been contaminated by Enterococci, that's not going to be easy, then it's not going to be suitable to use. The next slide, please. The cows, I think we've kind of covered this really well. It's really about trying to make those cows as clean as possible before you put on the clusters on the outside. Dry wiping is ideal for the dust. That deals with it really well and has been shown in research to be very effective. Really big thing is that if you are washing dirty cows, make sure you dry them. Otherwise, the water that's on the teats is just going to go straight into the milk liner and into the bulk tank. And that's where a lot of issues can come from. Next slide, please. The bulk tank. The bulk tank is, I suppose, to me, it's always the big workhorse in the farm because that's storing your milk, and that's really important. Make sure you've got enough compressors and compressor power, the plate cooler working really well, as Dave highlighted. That really takes the work away from the bulk tank. But if your bulk tank has got a build up inside it or isn't cooling milk fast enough, that's also where you can have your bacteria build up. Funny enough, it's actually the easiest part of all to clean. And one of the reasons we went chlorine-free in bulk tanks first was because that was seen by the industry as actually the easy win. But double check that your bulk tank is being cleaned properly. Check that you're using your right detergents. The tubes are devil's lads. Basically, they can crystallize, they can get stretched. Check the tubes are there and working and sucking off enough detergent. You need to check that you're going through your drums fast enough. If your drum is lasting an awful long time, it might be telling you that you're just underusing your detergent. Have a look in your tank. Usually every week is actually a good thing to do with a torch. Just have a look in your tank, look for a build-up, check that the agitators are working, check that the spray bowls are working. Just keep an eye on it. And most importantly, the outlet. Make sure that's clean at the end of, because it's at the end of the tank, it's where the milk is mostly coming out of. And if there's a build-up there, it can be a big issue. Next slide, please. I suppose to try to wrap up, all the answers are a myriad. And I suppose what we try and do most importantly is offer a service on farm to follow up and help you investigate what's happened on farm. Thermodurics or even any milk quality issue, it's rarely just one little factor doing it. Sometimes you've got to investigate and look for lots of different things. That's what we're there for. Call any of the team or myself if you can't get hold of somebody. We'll come out, we'll try to go through everything on farm with you. The other thing that we do, our newsletters and our pieces online with Columbia Connect and our Farm Focus, we always try to keep those as topical as possible. So usually we'll keep articles in there and they'll all relate to things that we've noticed on farm lately. So keep an eye on those because you might find a tip that actually works for you as well. Columbia Connect and our text messaging service gets your results out to you as fast as we possibly can. We also have videos online, and I suppose over the last few weeks, and particularly with COVID, because some people are still anxious about minimizing visitors on farm, we've tried to put together some helpful videos around thermodurics. They're all found on a YouTube playlist about thermoduric prevention and control. And in particular, we have a really nice segment done by Tom Phelan on how to measure wash troughs and things like that. Eamon Comiskey details some of the case studies that he's seen on farm. And John Fitzpatrick, we've got a really nice piece with John who actually details a full investigation and covers all the little bits and pieces that you might need to look at. So hopefully you'll find those online resources useful. They're on a playlist and that'll be available at the end of this webinar and you can have a look at it. It's on the Columbia Connect YouTube channel. Thanks for that. That kind of wraps up, I suppose, the formal piece. I'll hand back to you, Shane.
Thanks very much, Fionnuala, and to yourself and Dave for great insights there in terms of the technical sides of how to keep Thermoduric under control. And we've a good number of people on the call, and a lot of people sending in messages, sending in questions to us, some messages and comments as well. We maybe go through those now, but and thanks to everyone for that. But just some people are putting on their name, and some people are putting on their county as well. So do that. That'd be great. And some people are also sending in 4 questions in one text. So we'll get to them all. Dave, over to yourself first, and I'll sort of go back and forward between questions for both of you, just as how they've come in. But question, no name, but I've been on chlorine-free for a good number of years now, and has the same wash routine. But why does the problem only occur now and then?
So I presume the question is why does the Thermoduric issue turn up every now and then? Well, look, with Thermodurics, you could have a number of days which you have no Thermoduric count, and then you could have, because a cluster fell off in the parlor, it could be because you suddenly have very bad wet weather. It could be because the weather is actually very dry now and the cows are lying in bare pasture. So it could just be related to that collection of that milking, rather than with TBC, if you're high, you're going to stay high or you'll keep increasing. But with Thermodurics, it's a little bit different. It could be just down to that cluster falling off, or a bit of debris falling from that vacuum line. It gets sorted out, and then you don't have the problem again. So that's why you can have this intermittent issue probably with Thermodurics.
That's interesting, Dave. So it could just be one event that.
Yeah. It could just be one event. If a guy has got it really right, and generally speaking he hasn't a problem, it could just be one event that causes it. Now, if you have a build up of residues, it'll keep bouncing back and it won't go away.
That's great, Dave. A comment and maybe a bit of a challenge back. It takes too long to wipe the cows and they look clean. Do we need to do this, Dave?
Yeah, well, if the cows are clean and you're doing a dry wipe, which is very useful, as mentioned by Fanula, and I like it during midsummer, but you have to react to the weather. You have to react to the springtime and the autumn time. Those shoulders, if I've looked at bacterial counts and Thermodurics over the years, and you'll find that they're very high at those peak times. So you have to react on your teeth prep, particularly for those times. But do I need to do it? Look, if you have a very good wash routine, you see, the problem is they get in and then they multiply. So some guys, they have an excellent wash routine in place, so they don't get a chance to multiply inside. So that's why some guys say, well, I don't prep and I get away with it. But they have an exceptionally good wash routine to follow up, so they don't allow the temperature to multiply inside. That
keeps it at bay. The good wash keeps it at bay, even if it does get in, A sort of related question just from Patrick in Louth. What's the best pre-milking teat disinfectant to use? And I might add to that as well, Dave, is there any that you can't use pre-milking?
Well, I think Glenby have their own advisory role on that, on what ones that you shouldn't use from a residue point of view. I mean, there's a range of parts. I think that's the important thing here is 2 things. One is that you read the drum, because not all the teat tips, and there's 100 on the market, are suitable for pre and post. So that's the first critical thing, is to make sure that it's advised for pre and post. But also, if you disinfect, you certainly must wipe. You don't want to drink that milk. We don't want to collect that milk with additional residues in it. Like disinfecting teats, will work. It does reduce the bacterial levels in teats. There's no question about that. But you need to wipe those teats, and you need to listen to the advice from your advisory service from the point of view what ones are not suitable, for example, for collection from a Glanbia point of view.
Maybe
generally speaking, I would be looking to see, is the product recommended and is it registered? Because a lot of the teat tips on the market actually don't have the proper registration, and I think that's an important thing as well. You make sure that the product is actually registered to be legally used on farm.
Maybe to come over to yourself, Fanula, on that one, just around the pre-milking, particularly that should and shouldn't be used.
Yeah, I suppose one of the ones that is really key not to use, and just to call it out, is to make sure you're not using iodine as a pre disinfectant. In fact, iodine really shouldn't be used as a post disinfectant. Now there's a little bit more awareness of the residue issues there, but also I suppose this year we've got a couple of case studies where we found the wrong teat dip being used as a pre spray and causing chloride issues. So I suppose calling out chlorine dioxide type products, or they're not recommended for anything anymore for teeth disinfectant, but they're certainly not recommended for pre. The really big thing, as Dave said, is actually the extra step of making sure that there's no drip from that actually coming back into the milk, because that will cause a problem. So really just reading the instructions, and check with your milk quality advisor when you're changing your teeth disinfectant, if it's a new one, if it's suitable or not. Yeah, no, good advice there from the check with advisor, read the labels and make sure and wipe it off. A question in from David in Wicklow. Do I only have a problem in the summer? He's obviously not having any issues in the winter. Oh, yeah. Winter is actually great as milk quality advisor, because a lot of things are cold, and cold temperatures don't suit bacteria for growing. And that's one of my pieces that I talk about on farm with people. So if you've got a small bit of a build-up on farm or in the milking lines or in the bull tank, in the middle of summer, and particularly the last month where we've had really nice high temperatures, which have been great and very enjoyable, but that's when the bacteria grows. So your pipes during the day are up to 12, 16, 18 degrees. That plus a little bit of milk residue left over is the perfect environment for bacteria to grow. Well, if you think back to January and February, your lines are really cold. So, a lot of the time your lines are just above zero, maybe for having very cold days, but they're certainly no higher, between, about 4 degrees. Bacteria grow really well when things are over 6 degrees. So for me, I think some of the reason that we see more challenges on the farm during summertime are because the ambient temperatures are higher, and it's a better environment for bacteria to take hold and grow. And there's no doubt we've had plenty of hot weather there a few weeks back, so that has been a challenge as well. Dave, there's a question in there, just how much could a dirty cow affect the result? And you sort of covered that earlier, but one dirty cow coming in as a once-off, the claw piece dropping onto.
Yeah, well, I think, just one cluster falling off and sucking up feces could be just enough to cause your issue on that particular tank load. So one cow dirty, it depends on how clean her teeth are putting the cluster on. I think more so than anything else. But there's lots of little things that in the parlor, for example, that you shouldn't be washing down the jetters of the shells and liners when it's actually on a cow. That can be a problem, or washing down the cow platform when the cows are walking in. You do it before they come in. You don't want water splashing up on teeth as they walk into the parlors. It's just a little few things for practice within the parlor. You'd see, especially if you've a small number of units and extra people. People have time on their hands and they end up washing down things when it's actually on a cow. That's something to avoid. Perfect. Fionnuala, just any thoughts from yourself? Yeah, as Dave says, a one-off type event can be a contributing factor. And what sometimes happens then, if something comes in, and then it seeds the plant, it's what builds up from that. So, a lot of the time what we find is that we're actually dealing with stuff, and you mightn't even remember the one-off acid wash that you missed because you were busy, or the time that you had a problem with the cows, or the day you were rushing because you were at silage or something like that and didn't get a chance to do good teeth prep. So a lot of the time, things have built up over maybe a week or two. So you can't remember what actually happened that might have been different. And the first thing people will say to us, I'm doing the same thing, and why has it happened? So what we try to do as advisors is try to work backwards to see, well, what could have been the event if there was a one-off type event that Dave talks about, and what's happened since. And then we try to troubleshoot around that way. Oh, that's great. Another one maybe for yourself. Someone's messaging, no name, but my TBC is low, but my thermoduric result is high. Why is that? That's probably the most common question we get. Your TBC results are reported as just the numbers. It's really just about making your text, making text easy to get out. But a three for TBC is actually 3,000, or a 30 is a 30,000, while your thermoduric results come out to you as single numbers. So your 400 perhaps of thermodurics, and you've got maybe a three for TBC, actually means that you've got a 400 count for your thermodurics, and you've got a 3,000 for TBC. So always think of your thermodurics almost like a portion of your TBC results. Similar sometimes with cell count.
people ask, I've only got 122 cell count. It's actually 122,000. It's just the way that results are sent out via text chain.
And then Fionnuala, just in terms of the relationship between thermoduric bacteria and the total bacterial count, the thermodurics are a specific type, isn't it?
Yeah, so there's lots of different bacteria, and they're all counted when we do actual total bacteria counts. But the thermoduric bacteria are the ones that can survive heat. Now, other bacteria can survive cold, and particular types of thermoduric bacteria can survive cool conditions as well. So there's lots of different families of bacteria. So thermoduric bacteria, it's not just one particular type of bacteria, it's a whole lot of them, but they're just a subset of all the different types of bacteria that are around.
Oh, that's great. There's a question, Dave, for you from Michael in Kilkenny. He has found a build-up in his plant. He must have had an issue, and he's found a build-up in the lines. It must be in the plant. How does he remove it? I suppose the question is there a special wash routine to try and get that build-up clear?
I suppose the key thing here is that, that there is a build-up. What has been used by many is generally speaking, using about 0.7% caustic solution. For this scenario, if you want to remove the thing and keep within the products you have, I'd be suggesting that you go at 2% solution for a couple of washes of caustic, and maybe as 2% solution for your descale acid, and that should shift the problem that you have. But that's only half the step. The fact that it built up means there's a flaw in the system, right? It means there's a flaw in what you were doing before, and it'll come back again in 2 or 3 months' time. So you really, at that stage, that's the alarm bells to go and look at the amount of caustic or detergents you're using, the temperatures of your water, the volumes of water, the volumes of detergent, and so forth. That's the key. That's the alarm bell to go and do that. Otherwise, it can come back to haunt you again. But generally speaking, using about 2% caustic or 2% acid should remove that build up the stair, and obviously get your temperatures right going forward.
So for a short period, Dave,
it might be a couple of days to get this right, but you're doing the standard rinsing as before and after and so forth. But your strength is you're gone from maybe 0.7% to maybe 2% solution to deal with the issue. And obviously you study the plant after 2 washes, and your issue could be over. But it's what you do next is what counts. It's get a bit of help to find out where to go wrong.
To prevent future build-up.
Yeah.
Hang on. A question from Eamon in Carlow. Are plate coolers the major problem? His milking machine man has said that it's always the plate cooler.
Yeah, it can be an issue. Obviously, I wouldn't advise any farmer to be opening a plate cooler. I've suffered from that years ago. But it's the point I made earlier about this filter socks is important, that you keep the debris from getting into the especially if you're not doing any prep. There's a lot of debris in that line. And like, if you don't remove that sock and the sock breaks, all that debris ends up inside in the plate cooler. So, I think it's critical that you after making, you replace the sock with a clean sock for the wash program. And then if there's any grit or anything in the waters, you're capturing that as well. So I think yes, it can be a problem, but yes, you can be proactive in preventing it by changing those filter socks.
I have 2 questions, Dave, that are sort of linked. One is, I have a 24-unit parlor. Will it be harder to clean? And the second one is, are the detergents good enough for the larger plants?
Well, first of all, like all of the routines, the protocols that I've recommended that are available, right? We're all tested on 20 or 30 unit plants with milk meters. These are the ones that these are the ones that are harder to clean, where you have milk meters and these plastic copies. No, they're the hard parts to clean. So all the protocols have been tested against in that scenario. 20 units, 30 units. So there's no issue, reason why a 24-unit plant, if you follow the routine, that it won't be cleaned or kept cleaned. I would be concerned if we were getting thermoduric counts in our research farms, but we don't, and our TBCs would be 3,000 and 4,000 and 5,000. These are chlorine-free at all times. So look, that's the reality of it. The 24 units is no different than a 30 unit, and it's no different than a 15 unit for that matter. The hard part is, you can't leave any piece out. If you were using 14 hot washes, then you could have, for example, less descale wash. If you've only 7 hot washes, you need 3 descale washes. That's a simple guide on it.
Yeah. I know, Dave, there's been a good bit of research done in Teagasc on these. And I know you have a couple of slides there. Would we maybe just go through those?
If you don't mind, want to stick them up? Yeah.
Yeah.
We can have a look at it.
Stick those up on the screen, team.
Oh. Okay, so I suppose this is just the initial move to chlorine-free. Obviously, was on research farms, and then some of the pilot farmers, I suppose, 2 years ago, started looking at chlorine-free. Moved to chlorine-free. So we decided we wanted to monitor what was going on in these farms to see, was there an issue, especially over a time period. So we looked at it over 3 test periods, in April, September, November, and all these samples were tested at Moore Park, and there was 4 milk processors involved. There was farms, that from 4 milk, 36 farms in total for chlorine-free. So C means they were chlorine-based for machine and bulk tanks. Chlorine-free means that they were chlorine-free for all. And we did a range of tests. I'm not going to go through them all, but next slide, I'll just comment on them. So, like, basically, there's your total bacterial counts and your thermoduric counts, and you have a few of them there. But in all scenarios, because these farms, the chlorine-free farms, actually gave better results. And I think it's really, and how was that possible that they could be better than simply because these guys were shown what to do. Their advisors showed them, listen, you got to have this temp, you got to have this number of acid washes and so forth. And I think that's a factor in it. So it gave a positive, and they weren't even, doing it exactly as it said in the tin. I mean, I would have to say that they weren't all, having the exact temperatures and the exact amount of hot washes, and we still got excellent results. So, my view was that, like, if they follow the protocols exactly, they even get better results. So that message was good from those farms, and I included all of them. There's none left out of the scenario there. Next slide. I think it might be another slide. That's just a summary slide, maybe. Yeah. So that's just summarizing. There was no deterioration over the time, which is important to me that we looked at in April and November to see, like, because usually it's 3 or 4 months you could have a build-up. But it showed there wasn't a build-up. No, there was a range of products involved as well. There was given good results, and about 40% of these guys were actually using powder-based products. So, and as I mentioned earlier, look, they weren't all, doing exactly as because I didn't pick these farms. They were put forward, and they were agreed to let their milk be sampled by us. So we didn't tell them I didn't tell them what to do in terms of their wash routines, but so they still got excellent results. So that's a positive message from we tend to do obviously more of this type of work this coming year.
That's a really important piece of research. Now, in fairness, the chlorine-free are actually doing a better job when they're used properly. So, Fionnuala, is that what you would see on farm as well from being out on the road?
Yeah, I suppose just to comment on Dave's trials, I mean, they were genuine trials for anyone wondering about them. I mean, as milk advisor involved in those, we selected, Jerry Cronin was very involved with it, we selected a number of farms and submitted those to Dave. We didn't give a lot of guidance to them. And I suppose they were doing what they were doing, and the samples happened a number of times through the year. One of the things that we've all been involved with as milk advisors across the country is with Teagasc looking at the routines over the last probably 4 years. And one of the key areas that we identified is that we actually have to look at the detergents for a long time, not just over a 2-month period. And some of the detergents that we looked at along the way with Dave didn't work out in the long run. So, the ones that have actually kind of made the cut are the ones that actually really worked well across commercial farms, different conditions, and various milk advisors across the country. One comment, Shane, if I could just make it, there was a question there from somebody just about a corrective wash routine. That can be very variable. As Dave said, yes, absolutely, upping the strength of products might be the ideal answer. But don't forget, sometimes when you investigate it, you might actually find that it might have been as simple as just missing a couple of washes, or not realizing drums had run out, or things like that. So sometimes it's actually very simple. You just switch straight back to doing your really steady, nice routine and tick it off like steps and work it through. So it's not always needed to go up in strength necessarily. It might be just actually revising it back. Some people that use a lot of liquid washes, then what they've found is that a powder wash maybe once a week or something might actually strengthen the efficacy of their wash routine. but it's very, very individual, I'd say, Shane. And, you know, the important thing is get someone involved in the investigation with you, because that's what advisors are there to do. They're there to help. And as I said earlier, put the jigsaw back together.
Fionnuala, just while you're on there, there's a couple of questions relating to testing. One is, why do we only get one test result per month for Thermodurics? I know there are some additional testing done as well, but what are the quality controls from entry to lab? In other words, from the bulk tank to the lab?
Yeah, sure. We actually probably test a lot of people more than once. As I said, some of the loads are tested, and if there's follow-up issues needed there, any advisory pieces that we're doing on farm that we need to get extra testing done, we will go back and do that. We're looking at moving towards a second test across all the supplier base for 2022. I think that'll help. But also, you know, there is scope there that we're just trying to, I suppose, balance how many loads we test, how many suppliers we test, and it's just about getting the numbers right on a constant basis for the lab. But if you talk to your milk advisor, they will always, for their investigation, try to get that second test on for you for the month. The quality controls, everything travels across the country in cooled courier vans. We have a dedicated courier service that transports the samples in cooled vans. Refrigerated vans is the word I'm looking for, apologies. The drivers have ice on the trucks and things like that. We try to keep an eye on, we keep an eye on the samples and the results at all times. And if there's anything that we need to question, we will always go back and discuss that with the farmer. But overall, what we're trying to do is have a monitored cool chain across the country. Or we track our fridges that store the samples. We track the temperatures of the vans that are transporting the samples. And naturally, when they're in the lab, they're stored in large refrigerated rooms as well.
Good stuff. No, that's great. Just a question in there from Dave. Can higher percentage of detergent damage rubber or stainless?
I suppose in the past, I would argue that chlorine did more damage to rubber than caustic. You know, I haven't seen it as being an issue. I would think chlorine was an awful lot more severe on rubberware, and you all have experienced the past of using extra chlorine and finding that the water goes black after use, and that tells you how much carbon damage was done to the liners or on rubbers. So I would think that there's less effect to these caustic solutions than there was previously with detergent sterilizer solutions.
Yeah. There's a lot of questions coming in, and I'm conscious we're nearly up on the hour. So I'm gonna. There's a good number of people sending the same two questions, and I might put them both to both of you. And it's, what's the best water heating system to use? And that's maybe down to energy efficiency as well as and cost, as well as heating the water right. And the other is the best detergents to use. So maybe to both of you on best water heating system and the best detergents to use.
Fionnuala, do you want?
You maybe go first, yeah.
Yeah, Dave, you go first, yeah.
Okay. I suppose on the water heating one, the one bit of advice there, I suppose, is that, you know, if you have electrical water heating, you should have using nitrate, because it's actually half the cost of day rate. So that's a key one from my point of view. That if you're doing electrical, then it's half the cost. So, but if you're require 300 liters of hot water per day, you know, you're looking at, you know, gas systems or other alternative systems like that to use. Now you have the options like that are available that will keep, for example, water heated right through like the geyser system. I mean, they have advantages from that point of view. But it's really down, like oil heating is not expensive at the minute. I understand that cost-wise it's not, but that obviously will change. So it depends on the quantity of water that you require. But I mean, heat exchange units are very useful if somebody is installing a new plant, that it actually heats the water to a very high degree before you send it to your electrical heater. So if I was looking at something new, the heat exchange units are expensive, but I think they're a good idea. I'll leave it back to Fionnuala maybe, and you want to add to that heating thing before we talk about detergents?
Yeah, a really simple one to add in, and I'm always going to say just check it. So if you invest in a new hot water system, or you've got an existing one in front, make sure it's actually giving you what you were expecting. We came across a case lately where a gas heater, which should be is sold as the ideal, needed actually a bit of tweaking to make sure it was giving the right temperatures. So just check that you're getting enough hot water. There's a myriad of systems out there, and I would always say to farmers, go with the one that most suits your system. 2 water heaters, and if you've got electrical water heaters, I would say look at 2 water heaters as a minimum, because the problem with electric heaters is the cold water comes in on top of the warm water, and that can actually cool down your run temperature. Gas we find is great. You know, there's a lot of hot water on demand there, and even you know, that seems to be very good. There's geysers and are very good on farm and very instant. And also, I suppose the other one to call out is solar. Solar heating is now really coming into its own, and that's great. You know, I mean, that's going to be an energy efficient piece going forward. But the big piece is to know how much you need. So back to the 9, 14, 19, know how many litres of hot water that you need, and get the system that works best for you. Shane, you asked about the detergent one, so just to go into that, because I know we're running out of time. For me, it's about matching your system at home to what detergent. There's no one detergent that works. If there was, it would be great, lads. It would be very easy to do this stuff, but it's not. So actually trial and error sometimes needs to happen. We've found a number of detergents stand up over time. I would say just chat to a milk quality advisor, and they'll go through, well, what kind of a system do you have? How much hot water have you? And what's your own preference? Some people like automatic systems and other people like powder. So looking at making sure you're using some of the recommended stuff is the start. But then the next piece is actually matching your machine to what will work best for you. And you may need to use different detergents than on a machine versus your bulk tank. Again, chat to the milk quality advisors. Dave, you've done an awful lot of research on the detergents. Anyone standing out?
Yeah, well, I think you need to look at maybe the milk quality awards list there that I had on the web page, and you can see that some products came up a number of times, which is a positive sign, I think. But look, it's any of them will do badly if they're not, if the temperature isn't right and if the quantity isn't right, you know. So the best of products will actually, you can blame the product that you know, if you like, but often it's the way it's managed or used. So there is a range of products. Powder, yeah, I think if your manual system, you know, powders are a good idea. You know, it's back to that system. They're very high strength and caustic in them. So I like the notion, but they're not suitable for automatic systems. But it's calibration is if I was to give a clear message, would be with those automatic systems, you need to calibrate, put a jug, measure the amount they're using, because very often they may not be set to the level that they should. And what has happened is that the previous products would be more, the viscosity has changed. You know, if you went from a product that was about 12% or 13% caustic, or even, and now have gone to one at 25% caustic, you know, the suck-up rate from the automatic wash is way different. And apart from the fact you need a little bit more of it, you know, so that's why you need the calibration part is critical to get. So which product, you know, I go powder for manual, and I'll go liquid for automatic systems, and I pick a product off the list that's at least, you know, the 20%, 21%, 23%, 4% caustic. You need to be up around there. They're all on the Teagasc webpage as well. You can see the concentrations of products. There's some of them at 10%. So, you know, if you pick that, well, you know, the best to look with getting good results.
Oh, that's great, Dave. A couple more questions just come in for yourself. Why is the problem much more profound in 2021 than in the last 2 to 3 years? And that's a question from Vincent in Kildare. Is it the hot weather we've seen in July is having a bigger impact?
Perhaps Fionnuala might be best placed, because I wouldn't know about the levels that are seeing in co-ops from one year to the next, and maybe Fionnuala, you might be better.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I can take that one. It is and it's not. I do think the heat wave, which was very pleasant, has presented us with a challenge, because the warm weather tends to challenge our cleaning systems more than cold weather. But as a milk quality advisor, you know what, the summer from May onwards, when the temperatures rise, we would always have been busy between May, June, peaking in July, August usually. And there was one year where September was a divil as well. It was great weather, but it really held up the quality challenges. So as far as we would see, we would always see challenges in summer. Shane, it's not that there's more or less this year. Summer, it tends to be where we see challenges for bacterial growth. Two pieces just to call out in the video that John Fitzpatrick has done about the investigation piece. One issue is vacuum lines, in particular at the start of the summer. They tend to be an area that needs a lot of focus at the start of the summer, because you tend to get flooding of your vacuum lines maybe just around peak and when milk can be frothing, but you don't actually see the build-up problem until a little bit later. So we tend to see a lot of vacuum lines at that side of the year. And lately, just listening to the lads and talking to a lot of farmers, plate coolers, and maybe that's just going back to the debris coming in on teats and filters perhaps bursting and things like that. Plate coolers seem to be an area that people are finding issues with at this side of the year. So that's just two things literally happening on the ground. They're covered really well by John in the video, and I'd say to people, maybe just give 5 minutes having a look at that video. That'll cover it off well. So I don't think it's any worse this year. This is always our busy time for Thermodurics.
No, thanks for that. Two questions for yourself, Dave, and I've then a number of people are messaging in with specific problems they're having on farm, and I think we'll go back to them. But the two questions for yourself, Dave, are robots any different to the conventional milking machines?
In terms of Thermodurics, I presume, yeah. Well, yeah. Yes, that's an interesting question, because I've come across, comments in the past, not necessarily this year now, about issues with Thermodurics in robotic systems. But I think, again, it's back to the washing program, because most of those robotic systems have been set up or designed that you would actually be washing them with very high temperatures, chlorine-free actually. They were one of the first to go chlorine-free, but you were using very high temperature water 3 times a day. Yes. But I think in Ireland, we've seemed to, in lots of instances, we've dropped one of those washes back to twice a day. So that's a thing. But yes, I've heard of issues with Thermodurics, and I think you suggested maybe that's one of the areas that maybe could be improved on in terms of the amount of washes. And we're actually doing a bit of work on that very shortly. We've the robotic system set up, and that's an area that we're actually going to do a little bit of focus on Thermodurics in our robotic system.
Question in from Tom and Cork, just to finish, Dave. His water temperature's at 62 degrees. Is that high enough?
If it's 62 degrees and it's halfway through circulation, yeah, he's fine, but not as a starting temperature. Okay, and I've seen that too often. And I think Fionnuala mentioned it earlier about the electrical heaters. When you could start off at the 80 degrees coming out of it, and by the time the trough is filled, it's probably coming out. It could be coming out at 40 degrees. I saw it with our own farms. So so it's critical that you measure the temperature in the trough. You're talking about 75 degrees here. You want to have 75 degrees if you're going to get the end temperatures that you're looking for. 60 is fine for midterm, but way off the mark as a starting temperature.
Guys, just I'm conscious of time. We're over the hour now, and there's loads of questions coming in, and some specific, but also some general problems that people are having on farms. So what we'll do is we'll go back to each person individually with the questions. Just Fionnuala, in terms of it as a summary though, people who have problems, what's the next steps?
Yeah, thanks, Shane. I suppose, look, the main one that we would call out, talk to our team, get our team involved with investigating things on the ground, and that's what we're there for. It may not always be sorted in the first visit, that's because a lot of I go back to the jigsaw analogy again, we have to get everything to fit together, but that's what we're there for. As I said, following this, there'll be some videos online. There's a particularly good one from John Fitzpatrick, which shows all the investigative steps kind of put together as one clip. So that might be really of interest to people. But there's some nice pieces there lately from Tom Phelan and Eamon Comiskey, actually looking at particular case studies. One in particular, last thing to maybe call out, is the piece around the measuring the wash trough. And we probably cover that, and it sounds like a simple thing to do. But what do you do if it is too small? And it's very simple, basically look at a new one. They're not dear, but a lot of the time we've seen extended parlors and maybe extra cluster units added on, and the wash trough not actually, not changed. And that just means if you don't have enough hot water to start with, as Dave says, you're just not going to get your routine going right from the start. So yeah, so hopefully some of the resources that are available on Club BA Connect will be useful to people. And as I said, liaise with your milk quality manager. That's what we're there for.
That one-to-one personal touch, especially, and as you need to get on farm, you need to see it, you need to put your hand in the wound to get to know what the problem is. It's different on every farm, isn't it? And put the right wash in place. Guys, we need to call it there. Look, I'd like to thank everyone for joining the webinar today and for your participation and lots of questions. And for the questions we didn't get to, we'll get back to you individually, and one of the technical team will be in touch. Look, the webinar has been recorded and will be available, and then on Glanbia Connect on YouTube. And there's lots of other videos there as well on thermoduric management. Look, every farm is different, and so for this for your farm, get in touch with the local advisor, and we'll be able to work through and find solutions for your farm. Hope everyone has got some useful information from the webinar today. We'll have further live webinars in the near future, coming to the autumn now with lots happening on farm again. So to close our webinar today, thanks to everyone for joining and participating. To our speakers, Dave and Fionnuala, thank you very much for all your very useful information. And also to James and Brian who've been working there in the background to deliver the webinar for us. So folks, for joining today, stay safe on farm and look after each other. Thank you.